and welcome back to the Striha Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Parker Striha, and on today's episode, we are going to be doing part 2 of a 2-part series covering all of the moves that happened during the first week of NFL free agency. I'm by no means a professional, but I do love talking about sports, so thank you for joining me. So this episode, we are going to be covering the AFC moves that happened last week. Yesterday, I did the NFC, and this episode is going to be pretty similar. I'm not going to cover every single move that each team did just because I don't see any point or value in talking about a team re-signing, say, their 6th receiver or their 4th quarterback or their 8th corner or anything like that, because I don't want this episode to be an hour and a half long. This episode will probably be similar in length to last night's episode, so just grab yourself a snack and let's get right into the video. So starting off with the AFC North, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. Coming into the offseason, their biggest need was offensive line, and there was no question about that, and they fixed that in a big way. They signed guard Alex Kappa to a 4-year, $35 million deal. They signed center Ted Karras to a 3-year, $18 million deal, and they also signed right tackle La'el Collins to a 3-year deal. Money isn't really known on the La'el Collins deal as of when I'm recording this, but those are huge moves for the Bengals. I think all 3 of them are going to instantly slide in and be starters immediately, and I mean, that was really the main problem that the Bengals had last year, so really all there is to talk about. Glad they filled those holes, glad they got good players to fill those holes, and now they can protect Joe Burrow. They also released guard Trey Hopkins, which cleared $6 million. They released cornerback Trey Waynes, which cleared $11 million. They franchise tagged safety Jesse Bates to a 1-year, $12.911 million fully guaranteed deal. Great move for them. One of the best young safeties in the league, so I'm hoping they can work out an extension with him. They signed B.J. Hill to a 3-year, $30 million deal. They signed tight end Hayden Hurst to a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Now, I think the Hayden Hurst signing is going to go really under the radar because he hasn't really been talked about a lot since really ever. But with them losing C.J. Uzomah, it was in their best interest to bring in a starting caliber tight end, and I think they did just that with Hayden Hurst. And they also signed cornerback Eli Apple to a 1-year, $4 million deal. I think it's a stupid deal. The guy sold the Super Bowl, not a great corner, but not my team, so I don't really care if he fails them again. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they released linebacker Joe Schobert, which cleared almost $8 million. They released tackle Zach Banner, which cleared $5 million. And then on the offensive line, they signed Chuks Okorafor to a 3-year, $29.25 million deal. And they signed guard James Daniels to a 3-year, $26.5 million deal. Both of them are extremely young, and I'm glad that they kept Okorafor because he has been really a stalwart on that offensive line for a couple years. He's still extremely young, can still develop into one of the better tackles in the league. And then they brought in James Daniels from the Bears, who was one of the best offensive linemen on the open market this year. Just great moves, in my opinion. I think that organization is really well run. They know how to win, and they know what to do in order to win. So I think those are 2 really smart moves for them. They signed Levi Wallace to a 2-year, $8 million deal. They signed quarterback Mitchell Trubisky to a 2-year, $14.2 million deal. And I've heard some people that really don't like this move because they really just don't think Mitchell Trubisky is great. And I mean, this might be an unpopular opinion, but this is the way I feel about it. I don't think Mitchell Trubisky is horrible. I think coming into the league, he was just put into a really, really bad situation. Matt Nagy was not a good coach. Ryan Pace, I don't think, was a good GM. So Mitchell Trubisky was really screwed from the beginning just because that organization is not really well run, or at least it wasn't when those 2 were there. And there's a reason Trubisky was taken number 2 overall. So I think, especially in a class I think he was in the Deshaun Watson class. He was in the Patrick Mahomes class. So, I mean, he was taken number 2 overall. He's extremely athletic and has that upside. and I think he could develop and be a really solid starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then they also signed linebacker Myles Jack to a 2-year, $16 million deal. I really like this move for them. The Jaguars released him, which I thought was extremely surprising. He's one of the better linebackers in the league, and they probably did shop him around to see what they could get for him, but then for some reason decided it would be best to just release him. So yeah, the Steelers brought him in on a 2-year deal. He's still extremely young and can bring, it's weird to say a veteran presence when he's still only like 24 or like 25 or 26, but he can bring a really solid veteran presence to that inside linebacker spot in Pittsburgh. The Cleveland Browns signed defensive tackle Taven Bryan to a 1-year, $4 million deal. They signed Anthony Walker to a 1-year, $5 million extension. A really solid, really underrated linebacker. I thought that was a really good move for them. They released center J.C. Treader, which cleared just over $8 million. They released wide receiver Jarvis Landry, which cleared just about $15 million. Now, I was kind of shocked by this move, but not really. I kind of figured they'd at least try to trade him, and I'm sure they did, but they just didn't see any value. That they didn't like the value they were getting back, so they just decided to outright release him. He is, in my opinion, probably the best receiver left on the open market at the moment. I've heard that teams like Green Bay and Atlanta are interested in him, and I can also see Kansas City being interested in him after the events that unfolded this morning. But it'll be interesting to see where he signs and how this offseason plays out for him. They traded linebacker Mack Wilson to the Patriots for defensive end Chase Winovich. Mack Wilson had never really done anything for the Browns. He's still extremely young, so they ship him to the Patriots for Chase Winovich, a defensive end who can come in and either play on the opposite side of Myles Garrett right away or can come in when Myles Garrett is off the field and give some really solid reps at the defensive end position. They released tight end Austin Hooper, which cleared $9.5 million. And then in their obviously not their biggest move, because I'll talk about that in a little bit, but they traded a 2022 5th and 6th round pick to the Dallas Cowboys for wide receiver Amari Cooper and a 2022 6th round pick. So I talked about this a little bit in yesterday's episode. They essentially just traded a 5th round pick for Amari Cooper, and I think that's a steal. It's rare that you're going to take someone with that 5th round pick that's going to move the needle, so to say, or instantly contribute to that team. So they bring in a guy who can be their number one receiver right away and who's probably a top 15, top 20 receiver in the league. And the fact that you're getting him for next to nothing, I thought was a steal for the Browns. They then traded quarterback Case Keenum to the Bills for a 2022 7th round pick. Not really anything important with that. They just got rid of a backup quarterback to bring in Jacoby Brissett as their new backup quarterback. They signed him to I believe a 1-year deal, which not a lot of details are known about that as of right now. And then in their biggest move of the offseason, they traded a 2022 first-round pick, a 2023 first and third-round pick, and a 2024 first and fourth-round pick to the Houston Texans for quarterback Deshaun Watson and a 2024 fifth-round pick. And this was really surprising. I did not think he was going to go to the Browns. I figured the Texans were going to try to get him out of the AFC as fast as they could, especially if they were going to trade him. I didn't think they'd keep him in conference. But I think that's obviously a really huge move for the Browns. I think he's a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield. I don't think Mayfield's awful, but I think Deshaun Watson is just better. He has more upside on the athleticism side of the ball, and he can really move the ball down the field. I think he has a better arm. He's faster, more athletic. So he just gives them a different player at the quarterback position. And then after they traded for him, they then signed him to a 5-year, $230 million deal, which was fully guaranteed, and that was the most guaranteed money ever in a contract. So they're locking down their guy for the next 5 years and probably more after that as this contract winds down. Really good move for them. It'll be interesting to see where Baker Mayfield goes, because they're not going to keep Baker Mayfield if they have Deshaun Watson. It just makes no sense for them. And I believe both parties want to part ways. Baker Mayfield wants out of there, and the Browns want to get rid of him. So I thought he was going to go to the Colts, but then the Colts ended up making a move that I will talk about later. So I can see him going to probably like a Seattle or even Carolina, but I don't know how likely those are. But moving on, they then franchise tagged tight end David Njoku to a 1-year, $10.931 million fully guaranteed deal. I was kind of shocked by this move, I'm not going to lie. I figured when they gave Austin Hooper that massive contract a couple years back, I figured he was going to be their tight end one. So I didn't think they were going to keep David Njoku, but they obviously did. Not really a lot to it. I think he's a good tight end. I liked him coming out of college. I'm kind of sad Green Bay didn't get him, but it is what it is. Moving on to the Baltimore Ravens. They signed safety Marcus Williams to a 5-year, $70 million deal with $37 million guaranteed. So they have their safety to shore up the back end of that defense. They already have the corners, but now they have a young safety who they can trust for the foreseeable future. I don't think that was a bad signing by any means. I don't really know what that's $13 million a year, roughly. No, it's like $14 million a year, something like that. I'm not good with math. But I think that's a really good deal for him. He's only 24 or 25, I think, so they have him for the next 5 years and the years going into and in his prime, so not a bad signing for them. They signed Morgan Moses to a 3-year, $15 million deal to come in and probably be their starting right tackle. They signed Michael Pierce to a 3-year, $16.5 million deal. They're bringing him back because they did draft him a couple years ago. I don't know what round it was, but they're bringing him back. They signed fullback Patrick Ricard to a 3-year deal to keep him in Baltimore. And they were signing linebacker Zadarius Smith to a 4-year, $35 million deal, but then Zadarius Smith backed out of the deal to get a better deal someplace else, and that ended up being Minnesota, like I talked about last night. The AFC East, we will start with the New England Patriots. They signed tackle Trent Brown to a 2-year deal to keep him in New England. Just a massive human being, and he really shores up that right side of the line for them. But his counterpart on the right side, Shaq Mason, was traded to the Bucs for a 2022 fifth-round pick. If I'm the Patriots, I don't know what the Patriots are doing. I thought that was a horrible move for them because Shaq Mason is a better guard in the league, and they got him. Well, they basically sent him away for nothing, so that was kind of a steal for the Bucs. So that's another hole that they have to fill now. They traded Chase Winovich to the Browns for Mack Wilson. Neither player was really doing it on their original team, so I think this will be good for Chase Winovich to go to Cleveland and try to get a fresh start, and same with Mack Wilson. They assigned a 1-year, $3.986 million tender on Jacoby Myers, who I believe had his first receiving touchdown this year, and he's been in the league for however many years. So not a bad move for them. I don't think he's a great receiver, but he knows the building, he knows the organization, so just a smart move to keep him in there. They signed safety Devin McCourty to a 1-year, $9 million extension. Not a bad move for them. He's one of the better safeties in the league. Just try to keep that band together, keep him there until he decides to retire. They signed Jawan Bentley to a 2-year, $9 million deal. Just linebacker depth. I'm not sure if he'll start or where he'll start, but it's good to keep him there. They then released Kyle Van Noy. Not really a surprising move. I don't know how much value he has currently, but I kind of saw that one coming. The Miami Dolphins, and boy were they active this offseason. They franchise tagged tight end Mike Gesicki to a 1-year, $11 million deal. Love that they're keeping him in the building. He's one of my favorite tight ends in the league, and he's a really solid and reliable weapon for a young quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. They signed Emmanuel Ogbah to a 4-year, $65.4 million deal. He's been extremely solid since he got to Miami, and he's been one of their best defensive players. So they locked him down with a deal that I think he definitely deserved. They signed running back Chase Edmonds to a 2-year, $12.1 million deal. They signed Cedric Wilson to a 3-year, $22.05 million deal. They signed running back Raheem Mostert to a 1-year, $2.125 million deal. I don't think any of those three players are necessarily going to play a massive role. Like, they're not going to lead the league in anything, but those are three really solid players to come in and can help take some stress off of Tua's back and just can help him develop. They're, like I said, they're not great players, but they're definitely good players. I think those contracts are all. I think the Cedric Wilson deal might be a little expensive for him, but I don't. But the Dolphins had money; they could really spend it however they wanted. So I don't think that was terrible. Just bring in weapons for Tua so he can develop, and we can see what he has to see if he is your franchise quarterback. But they also did sign quarterback Teddy Bridgewater to a 1-year, $6.5 million deal to come in and be the backup. I don't think he's going to be taken to his job, but I think he's a solid backup to have. They signed Connor Williams to a 2-year, $14 million deal to come in and shore up one of their guard spots because that offensive line is one of the worst in the league. So it's just nice to bring in a starter for fairly cheap. And then they got one of the biggest free agents in all of free agency this year. They signed tackle Teron Armstead to a 5-year, $75 million deal. Tua and the Dolphins have their left tackle now. I mean, it was either going to be Miami or Jacksonville that brought him in, and it ended up being Miami. Great signing for them. I love Teron Armstead. I love that the Dolphins made an effort to get him, and they obviously did get him. I mean, that's huge. I think Tua's a lefty, so that's not his blindside protector, but it's still one of the best tackles in the league. And then this morning, which this news came out of nowhere, they traded a 2022 first, second, and fourth round pick along with a 2023 fourth and sixth round pick to the Kansas City Chiefs for wide receiver Tyreek Hill. And then after that, they signed him to a 4-year, $120 million extension. So another weapon for Tua. They already have Jalen Waddle, who's a speed demon, and now they bring in the speed demon in the league. They bring in the fastest guy in the NFL, who's one of the best receivers in the league. I don't know what exactly prompted him to want out of Kansas City. I'm pretty sure it was money. They weren't offering him as much money as he wanted. He wanted out. They sent him to Miami, and I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to help with the development of a guy like Jalen Waddle, who plays somewhat similar to him. And then, like I said, he's just going to give Tua a reliable weapon, even though I don't know how much that offense is going to be throwing the ball down the field. Just a great move by them overall. The Buffalo Bills traded a 2022 7th-round pick to the Browns for Case Keenum. Just getting in a backup quarterback for Josh Allen. Not really a guy that's going to take his job. Really all there is to that. They released guard John Feliciano, which cleared $3.4 million. They released tackle Darrell Williams, which cleared $6.3 million. They released linebacker A.J. Klein, which cleared $5.1 million. They released Cole Beasley, which cleared $6 million. I mean, that's two of their starting offensive linemen that they released, so those were kind of surprising. And then Cole Beasley, they were either going to trade him or release him. I don't think they really had that big of a cap penalty for doing so. He'll go find a starting job someplace else. They signed tight end O.J. Howard to a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Despite finding this surprising, I really like it. O.J. Howard was a first-round pick a couple years ago and never really developed on the Buccaneers. And I'm not exactly sure what his role is going to be on the Bills because they already have Dawson Knox, so he's not going to be starting over Dawson Knox. But I think that's a really solid athletic backup tight end to help Josh Allen. They signed center Mitch Morse to a 2-year, $19.5 million extension, keeping their starting center in the building, which I thought was a great idea. They signed Jamison Crowder to a 1-year, $4 million deal. I think that's kind of a Cole Beasley replacement. Another really good slot receiver for Josh Allen to throw the ball to. They signed guard Roger Saffold to a 1-year, $6.25 million deal. Just another guy that can come in and start on that offensive line. They signed defensive tackle Tim Settle to a 2-year, $9 million deal, just depth on the defensive line. They signed Duke Johnson to give them running back depth. And then in probably their most surprising move, they signed Von Miller to a 6-year, $120 million deal. However, it only has $51.4 million guaranteed, so it won't be very long before they can release or trade him without facing really any penalties. I saw this coming out of nowhere. I did not see this move coming at all because I don't really know if he fits their scheme, but Von Miller is one of the best edge rushers in the league, and he showed that when he was in LA last year. So I think he's going to go in and he's instantly going to improve that Buffalo defense, and he's going to make them a force to be reckoned with in the AFC. The New York Jets traded linebacker Blake Cashman to the Texans for a 2023 6th-round pick. They signed tight end CJ Uzoma to a 3-year, $24 million deal. That's their starting tight end now. They signed guard Laken Tomlinson to a 3-year, $40 million deal. It's a starter. They signed Braxton Berrios to a 2-year, $12 million extension. They signed Jordan Whitehead to a 2-year, $14.5 million deal. He can probably start at one of their safety spots this year after they lost Marcus May. They signed tight end Tyler Conklin to a 3-year, $21 million deal. And then they brought back both of their backup quarterbacks. They signed Joe Flacco to a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. And then they brought back the legend himself, Mike White, with a 1-year, $2.54 million tender. The AFC South, the Indianapolis Colts traded a 2022 third-round pick to the Falcons for Matt Ryan. I loved this move for them, and I think that's about as much as the Falcons were going to get for him, and I think the Colts were the perfect team to make that move. Matt Ryan is due a lot of money, and the Colts had a lot of cap space to throw around, and I think they just brought in a quarterback who can instantly help them push for a Super Bowl run this year. They traded Rock Ya-Sin to the Raiders for Yannick Ngakoue, just a corner that never really developed for them for a starting defensive end, which I thought was a great move. They traded Carson Wentz, a 2022 2nd and 7th round pick, to the Washington Commanders for a 2022 2nd round pick and a 3rd round pick and a conditional 2023 3rd round pick that can become a 2nd round pick. I talked about that with the Washington Commanders yesterday. Just he wasn't cutting it for the Colts, and they obviously brought in Matt Ryan. So really all there is to it. Tight end Jack Doyle retired, and in the lieu of that, they signed Mo Alley Cox for a 3-year, $17.5 million extension. He's going to be their starting tight end. There's really no question about that. The Houston Texans traded a 6th-round pick to the Jets for Blake Cashman. He'll probably start in Houston just because that team is awful. They signed cornerback Desmond King to a 2-year, $7 million extension. Great move for them. He can play safety or corner, so that really just keeps talent on the team that they don't really have a lot, so great move for them. They traded quarterback Deshaun Watson and a 2024 6th-round pick to the Browns for a 2022 1st and 4th round pick, along with a 2023 1st and 3rd round pick and a 2024 1st and 4th round pick. Talked about it with the Browns. I mean, they were going to get rid of Watson. I didn't think they'd send him to the Browns, but I mean, I'm not surprised they moved him. I don't know if it's necessarily Davis Mills' time to shine now, because I don't know if he's necessarily the franchise guy, but it looks like the door is open for him to be the starter this year. They got 3 first-round picks for Watson, which that's a pretty hefty haul for the Texans, and they can hopefully use all those picks to help improve their roster that is it's just bad. The Jacksonville Jaguars franchise-tagged starting left tackle Cam Robinson to a 1-year, $16.6 million deal. Good move for them. Keep your starting left tackle in the building to protect Trevor Lawrence. They signed tight end Evan Ingram to a 1-year, $9 million deal. They signed Zay Jones to a 3-year, $24 million deal. And in one of the most shocking moves of the offseason, they signed Christian Kirk to a 4-year, $72 million deal. I mean, I like that they're bringing in weapons for Trevor Lawrence that are better than what they had, especially with Evan Ingram. But Christian Kirk did not deserve that money. He's a good receiver, but I don't think he's worth as much as he's getting paid now. Just the guy's never had over 1,000 yards he's never had over 1,000 yards in a season ever since coming into the NFL, and now you're paying him like one of the top receivers in the league, and I just don't think that was money well spent. They signed Brandon Scherf to a 3-year, $49.5 million deal. Love the signing for them. He's one of the best guards in the league, instantly comes in and is a starter. They signed Foyesade Oluokun to a 3-year, $45 million deal. A bit rich for my taste, but he's going to come in and be one of the starting linebackers. They signed Darius Williams to a 3-year, $30 million deal. And they signed Foley Fadukazi to a 3-year, $30 million deal. So, I mean, they were really just throwing money around. But, I mean, really, why else would you go to Jacksonville if you aren't getting paid a massive amount of money? And they did release linebacker Miles Jack, which cleared $8.35 million. The Tennessee Titans traded a 2023 6th-round pick to the Rams for wide receiver Robert Woods. I loved this move since the next move I'm talking about, they released Julio Jones, which cleared $11 million. They needed another guy alongside of A.J. Brown. And Robert Woods, I don't know if he'll be back healthy or when he'll be back and healthy because he is coming off of an ACL tear. But I think that's a really solid wide receiver to pair alongside A.J. Brown. And that just gives quarterback Ryan Tannehill another really reliable weapon. And if you're Tennessee and you choked in the playoffs this year, you need to do all you can to reload that team to try to make a stronger push at the Super Bowl this year. They signed outside linebacker Harold Landry to a 5-year, $87.5 million extension. He deserved every penny of that. He's one of the best young edge rushers in the league and developing into one of the best edge rushers overall in the league. So they were not going to let him leave the building. They released cornerback Janoris Jenkins, which cleared $6.9 million. And they signed tight end Austin Hooper for 1 year, $6 million. Starting tight end, not a bad move. He's a good tight end when he's healthy, and I think that was probably one of the better routes that Tennessee could have went. Going to the AFC West, the Kansas City Chiefs franchise tagged Orlando Brown Jr. for a 1 year, $16.6 million fully guaranteed deal. Great move, got to protect Patrick Mahomes. They signed safety Justin Reed to a 3-year, $31.5 million deal. It doesn't look like they're going to be bringing back Tyrann Mathieu, so bring in a guy like Justin Reed who's still extremely young and can be a really good starting safety for you on that defense that is really not that great. They signed Juju Smith-Schuster to a 1 year, $3.25 million deal. I think he could have got more money elsewhere, but Kansas City was interested in him last year, and they're obviously in a better situation than Pittsburgh was. So I'm not surprised he came here. He's going to be, well, by the looks of it now, he's going to be probably their number one receiver unless they make another move. I don't think he's a great number one receiver, but not my team. They can make whatever move they want. I don't really care, really. If it hurts their team or makes it better, doesn't really affect me. They signed Andrew Wiley to a 1 year, $2.5 million deal. Just another depth offensive lineman who has started a lot of games for them, and he can do just that when need be. They traded wide receiver Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins for a 2022 first, second, and fourth round pick to go along with a 2023 fourth and sixth round pick. Didn't see this move coming, but I think ultimately it's going to hurt Tyreek Hill more than it's going to hurt the Chiefs. I don't really know what the Chiefs are going to do to replace him. They are hosting Marquez Valdes-Scantling today. I don't know if they've came to a deal yet, but he's definitely a guy that he's not going to necessarily replace Hill, but he gives Mahomes a bigger deep threat because I think Valdes-Scantling is like 6'3", 6'4", so he has a really big-bodied deep threat that Mahomes can throw to. The Denver Broncos, not going to talk about the Russell Wilson trade because I did that in its own separate video. They signed Alex Singleton to a deal that I don't really have any details on yet. They signed Josie Jewell to a 2 year, $11 million deal, just adding linebacker or keeping linebacker depth with Jewell and bringing in Singleton, just kind of improving that defense. They signed defensive tackle DJ Jones to a 3-year, $30 million deal. Just got to improve that defensive line. And then they signed defensive end Randy Gregory to a 5-year, $70 million deal with only $28 million guaranteed. It was originally reported that he agreed to the same deal with Dallas, but then shortly after it came out that he was signing with the Broncos. And I mean, that's a really good deal for Denver. I don't know if he's necessarily a 3-4 defensive end, but I mean, I'm not sure what role he's actually going to play with them, because I do believe they run a 3-4 scheme, and I don't know if he's an outside linebacker for them or if they're going to throw him on the line still. But with that guaranteed money so low, they can afford to cut him in the future with really no repercussions. The Los Angeles Chargers, they signed Mike Williams to a 3-year, $60 million deal. Got to keep Justin Herbert happy, keep his number 2 receiver in the building, and Mike Williams is one of the better young receivers in the league. They signed defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph Day to a 3-year, $24 million deal, and they also signed defensive tackle Austin Johnson. I don't think either move is really anything special, but Joseph Day is a really good defensive tackle, and bringing in those two guys can really help stop the run, and that's a problem that Los Angeles struggled with all year last year. They signed tight end Gerald Everett to a 2-year, $12 million deal. He's a better receiving option than Jared Cook is, and I think that's really all there is to it. He's going to provide more upside for Justin Herbert. They released Brian Bulaga, which cleared just under $11 million. And they signed cornerback J.C. Jackson to a 5-year, $82 million deal, which he was one of the biggest free agents this year, and the fact that they got him was huge. They're already a team that is poised for a Super Bowl run, but now they brought in J.C. Jackson to go along with Asante Samuel Jr., so they do have one of the better young cornerback duos in the entire league. And then they traded a 2022 second-round pick and a 2023 sixth-round pick to the Chicago Bears for Khalil Mack. This was an absolute steal for them. They should just be laughing right now because they got him for pretty much nothing. They're going to put him on the other side of Joey Bosa, and they're instantly going to have probably the scariest pass-rushing duo in the league. The Las Vegas Raiders signed defensive end Max Crosby to a 4-year, $94 million extension. Well-deserved. He's one of the best defensive ends in the league. They signed Chandler Jones to a 3-year, $51 million deal. Just a guy that can go in. He's one of the best defensive ends in the league also. They're going to put him on the other side of Max Crosby, and once again, like I said with the Chargers, going to have one of the best pass rushing duos in the league. They traded Yannick Ngakoue to the Colts for Rock Yassin, just getting in a corner that hasn't really done a lot with Indy, so hopefully bringing him into Las Vegas can help him reach his full development, and hopefully he can be a solid starter for them. They released linebackers Corey Littleton and Nick Kwiatkowski, which cleared up just about $15 million. They also released Carl Nassib, which cleared $8 million. And then the biggest move this offseason, in my opinion, they traded a 2022 first and second round pick to the Packers for wide receiver Davante Adams. And then after that, they immediately signed him to a 5-year, $140 million contract. Huge. Carr gets the biggest and gets the best player I think he's ever played with in the NFL. I don't think there's really any question to that. I mean, did he play with Charles Woodson? I know Charles Woodson was on defense, but he has the best player that he has ever thrown to or ever going to throw to probably. These two were crazy in college because they did both go to Fresno State together, and they got the best receiver in the league for honestly a lot less than it should have taken them to get him, especially when you look at a guy like Tyreek Hill who was worth 5 picks, and you only give up 2 for Davante Adams. However, these are higher round picks that Las Vegas gave up, but good luck to secondaries in that division trying to cover Davante Adams and Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs and Hunter Renfrow, and they also signed Demarcus Robinson from the Chiefs. So that team is going to be really scary. I love the move for them. I think Now they need to get a contract extension in the works for Derek Carr, because I think he and Devontae are immediately going to have close to, if not the same connection that Devontae and Aaron Rodgers had. So good luck, AFC teams. That's really all I got to say. I thought it was that move was shocking. I was taking a nap when it happened, and I woke up and saw it. Just kind of completely, I was shocked when it happened. I did not see it coming, but like I said, I was actually in Las Vegas when the deal happened, so I thought it was kind of not really weird, but the fact that my favorite team's best receiver got traded to the city I was in shocking fashion. But it is what it is. The Raiders got him for pretty much nothing, and it'll be interesting to see how he and Carr and that Raiders team play this year. But as always, I'm your host, Parker Striha, and this has been the Striha Sports Podcast. Our random sport fact of the day is that the idea of pole vaulting can be dated back as far back as ancient Greek times. As always, thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for whenever a new video gets posted.